Ko John Reynolds, toko ingoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. So it gives me really great pleasure today to introduce our friend, our speaker for this, the second in our BRNZ seminar series. So just a little bit of housekeeping for those that didn't hear me say this to start with. So a reminder to please keep your microphones off. And at any time you want to type in a question that comes up as Hinemoa's talking, we'll keep them till the end if we could, please. But I will, I'll direct those to Hinemoa. I might call upon you to actually deliver your question with your video on, so we can get more of a whānau feel here, rather than just hiding behind a black screen. But if you don't want to talk, then just say, John, please read this out. So to our speaker for today, Dr. Hinemoa Elder, who many of you, or almost everybody will know, is our Māori strategic leader for brain research in New Zealand. Now, she's a senior lecturer at the University of Auckland and a consultant psychiatrist at Starship Hospital. So very busy, very, very hard to combine academic careers and careers in service as well as be a clinician. It's exceptionally hard to balance. So her expertise is in mental health and rehabilitation, child and adolescent psychiatry, neuropsychiatry, collaborative community research, and implementation to help us with a tikanga Māori framework for understanding neurodegenerative disorders. So today, she's going to speak to us as the first Indigenous alumna of the Homeward Bound Women in Science Leadership Project that she will describe to you, aiming to take 1,000 women in science to Antarctica over 10 years. So her title is He Rerenga o Hui te Rangiora, following in the footsteps of Hui te Rangiora. Hinemoa, kia ora.
Kia ora. Te whare e tū nei au e ka ranga mai, te marae tā koto nei ka ranga. E te iwi he pai nei, tēnā rā koutou katoa. E te waiti, e te waitā, rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou, a tēnā rā koutou katoa. Ko wai mirirangi te tupuna, no muri whenua hau, ko Hinemoa tōku ingoa. It's wonderful to have a chance to share my experience in Antarctica and being part of the leadership program called Homeward Bound. It's been quite a daunting task, actually, putting this presentation together. Gone back through my old notebooks. It seems like a lifetime ago, actually, and it was only November and December last year, but the world has changed, has it not? And certainly this experience that I'm about to share with you now has shaped some of my thinking about what we've all been going through in the last couple of months. So as John said, and thank you for that lovely introduction, John, Homeward Bound is a groundbreaking leadership program, and it's set against the backdrop of Antarctica, a place that some of you may have been to, and those who haven't, I imagine it's probably on many people's bucket lists. And this program is about heightening the influence and impact of women in STEM, making decisions that shape our planet. So you might be thinking, why Antarctica? Well, as some of you will be aware, Antarctica is a designated place on Earth, the only designated place on Earth for peace and science, according to the Antarctic Treaty System, which commenced in 1959. So an ideal place, really, for a gathering of 100 or so women from STEM to consider our role as growing our leadership potential for the betterment of Mother Earth. And it's a place where Mother Nature dominates. I'm wearing some of my gears, as you can see, from being in Antarctica. Without a lot of warm clothes, we humans would not survive. So it's a harsh and beautiful environment, strips away the trappings of life, no Wi-Fi, heart-stoppingly beautiful, and a great equalizer. So I thought that it was an extraordinary opportunity to go there on a ship for almost 3 weeks with this band of women from all sorts of disciplines in science. The woman who came up with this concept actually had a dream about it. Fabian Dattner is an extraordinary visionary woman from Australia, and she was working helping women in a range of science fields, and had this dream about women on a ship going to Antarctica. So her dream is that, as you mentioned, John, 1,000 women in STEM over 10 years on this program. So I was in the most recent cohort, as you can see there. There were 99 of us, and that's rather poignant, the fact that there were 99, and I'll share more about that in a moment. So yes, there were in fact 99 women, 29 nationalities, and you can see there representation from all around the world. We've got some cool photos to share with you. We're lucky to have some wonderful, very talented women from documentary filmmaking and communications, and so we've got some extraordinary pictorial memories of our trip. One of the very serious underpinnings of this whole program is that we have a broken system in terms of women coming into science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine. And I've highlighted a few here. On the slides, I have included the link to the full paper, which was published in Nature, I believe, in 2018. Nature, Ecology and Evolution. So as you can see, there are a whole range of ways that you can measure discrimination against women in our fields of scientific endeavour. And so this is one of the reasons that the program was started and has been maintained, and will, I believe, gather momentum in terms of seeking ways to alleviate those difficulties. And so here are just a few, I hope you can see the slide okay. Here are just a few points around how this leaky pipe, as it's been described, could be made to be more equitable, around reforming academic publishing and peer review, ensuring we women have equal access to informal professional networks, affording greater recognition of the extra demands outside the workplace that traditionally fall on women, even in 2020, when assessing candidates' achievements, providing better access to parental leave and additional provisions to help people return to work, and striving for a representative gender ratio of invited speakers at academic conferences. And if we have time, I'd be interested to hear from my other female colleagues around your experiences of being part of organising conferences, because I've found this particularly difficult in advocating for female speakers in my specialty in our conferences. So those are some of the very important underpinnings of this program. It's a 12-month program, and we receive training in leadership, strategy, visibility, and science collaboration. And I'll go into a little bit of detail shortly. So during the course of the year, we engage in virtual meetings, we're linked into small groups, we have personal coaching, and we have all sorts of readings and homework to do. And we have to fundraise also, because the program costs about 30,000 New Zealand dollars to attend. And actually the fundraising part is an important part of honing the message for each of us, delegates, participants, to really be able to learn how to communicate our stories effectively. And then at this very special conclusion of the year, we went to Argentina for a week and then had 3 weeks in Antarctica, and some special activities while we were on board an amazing vessel called the Hebridean Sky. So team Homeward Bound 4, so this is the 4th cohort. We went down to Ushuaia in Argentina and started our program on the 19th of November last year. We departed the port on the 22nd and we arrived back on December the 11th. We had a well-being team on board, including a psychiatrist, a colleague of mine from Australia, Dr. Sandra Randavini. This was a really important part of the learnings from previous years. It's extraordinary to be away from friends and family for such a long period of time. And what previous groups had learned was that having some mental health professionals on board was essential. We had a wonderful faculty, including Fern Wixon. Some of you may know Fern. She is an Australian who lives in Norway and has a lot to do with the marine mammals and preservation of mammals and negotiating with various different interest groups in that part of the world. Lorraine McCarthy is a Kiwi. She's an expert in one of the leadership tools that we used to better understand our own leadership styles and tendencies, and she's also a counsellor. Fabian was on board, as I mentioned, the visionary who started the program, an incredible leader from Africa, Masimbi. I'll tell you more about her in a moment. Justine and Cassandra, who led the science collaboration program, Kit, who's the strategic leader, Julia and Jen, who were part of the visibility and comms aspect. And then we were very fortunate to have some other fantastic women leaders, Anna, Graciela and Steph. And in addition, we had a 13-strong expedition crew on board the ship, led by, I'm gonna claim her as a Kiwi. I believe Maria was actually grew up in Newfoundland, but she has strong Kiwi connections. Maria Cashin. You will hear her voice at the end of my presentation. She took great care of us. So we had daily trips on Zodiacs and she was in charge of all of that. And I also want to honour and acknowledge my 3 roommates over the time. So we were each buddied up, shared a room with another participant for a week or so. Firstly, I roomed with the extraordinary Professor Tammy Eager. She's a professor of occupational safety from Ontario, Canada. Just a complete inspiration. And you know, when you meet people that just make your life better, all 3 of these women were like that. I was so privileged. My second roomie, Samia El-Feki, is a research scientist originally from Tunisia, and she currently works for CSIRO in Australia. Samia is a real go-getter. She is passionate about removing infectious diseases carried by mosquitoes. And she showed a fantastic slide in her talk on board where she's leaning over a great big tyre that's got some water in it in some part of the Middle East, and she's smiling from ear to ear because she's discovered a place where mosquitoes breed and she's going to get rid of that. And finally, Anna. Anna's an astrophysicist originally from Barcelona who lives in Germany with 2 young children. So you get the flavour. I mean, these women were absolutely extraordinary. So I just want to show you, this is a slightly busy slide, but these are the aspects around the interwoven purpose and strategy about what's going on and all the aspects of the program. We worked hard on board. This wasn't some sort of holiday. We had a lot of expectations. We were also allocated writing blogs and articles for newspapers and such like. So we were very busy. So centered around the idea of women as leaders, building leadership capacity, visibility, impact on the world, building a sense of a consistent message, and working on our personal strategy, which is a pretty painful process. And then developing this sort of informed position or voice on the background of our unique STEM backgrounds. And having a group of these sort of expert, capable, intelligent participants. Wow, yeah, it was high octane. Here's another quick slide just about the layers of the program, and you will have access to these slides and can pause this and have a quick look at it. I won't dwell on it too long today because time is relatively short. But this program has been well honed and really makes you work on finding out how to tell your own story, and then how to put your strategic plan into place. So I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. Let me just show you this slide, which gives you an idea of where we went. So we were in the Antarctic Peninsula, which is that little finger-like projection off the side of the main continent. And it was summertime, thankfully. And we were very blessed with the weather. So you can see that we did 13 landings. That's the highest number of landings that they had ever done on this journey. And in fact, we constituted a world record of the largest number of women to go to the Antarctic Peninsula. So as you can see, and some of you will be experts in Antarctica, which I am not, we saw a range of different aspects of the peninsula, and we were lucky enough to visit 2 research stations. Argentina has a number of research stations on the peninsula, and Carlini is the one we visited. And we were also very privileged, really on the basis of the liaison between our Chinese participants on our program and the research station there, the Great Wall Station, which we visited, and I'll show you some photos of that later on. So I now want to turn to the issue of Māori in Antarctica. The first day that we were on board the ship, there was a lecture that we were given about the history of people in Antarctica. And as I listened to this lecture unfold, it was, as I sadly had predicted, it was about the history of Pākehā people going to Antarctica. There was nothing about Indigenous exploration. So at that point, I realised, well, I'm here. It's my responsibility to highlight the fact that actually there's another history which has been left out of this lecture and out of our thinking. And so I was very lucky to have in my possession a fantastic report written by one of our colleagues, Ngāpuhi Mita, who's actually been a student of Anne-Marie Jackson's and is a close friend of Chelsea's. And I had known that Ngāpuhi had been to Antarctica and had written a report about a summer studentship that she did there in 2016, 2017. And so was reminded again of, you know, our Māori students are such extraordinary scholars, and I felt very, very lucky to have that knowledge and to be able to share that knowledge with my colleagues on board and to share with you now. So we know that there was a Polynesian explorer, navigator, and his name was Hui Te Rangiora, and he sailed in Antarctic waters on the waka Te Iwi o Aotea. Elsden Best wrote about this, another author, Andreasen, wrote about it, and Ngāpuhi wrote about it in her report. Several hundred years later, one of Hui Te Rangiora's descendants, Arutanga Nuku, returned. And so it was really emotional for me and important in terms of my feeling safe to be there and my connection and my continuing that whakapapa, if you like, of Māori alongside my colleague Ngāpuhi in this whenua of Hine Hukapapa, one of our deities, our female deities of the ice and snow. So as John said, I'm the first Indigenous woman to go on this project journey. So I just want to mihi to Ngāpuhi and her very important work that she did, and I commend her report to you. I will ask Anne-Marie if we can make that widely available. It's an excellent report, and it really exemplifies mātauranga Māori and the importance of having that as part of this wider discourse. I now want to honour the New Zealand members of the trip. We called ourselves the Frozen Ferns. We got together as soon as, and here we are in Ushuaia. I'm just so blown away by these wonderful women. Bianca Das, Mita Briley is in the centre. Bianca's to the other side with the red glasses. Rachel Cooper's on there, and Katie Seisland. What a magnificent ropu to be part of. And at the same time, it brings me to some really sad, a sad part of our trip. Another New Zealander, Māori woman, took her own life early in January last year. So she wasn't able to come with us in person, but we took her with us. We had a special ceremony for her on the ice. I'll show you a picture of that later on. So I suppose I want to honour Lily's memory. She's from Kaitahu from Taranaki. And I think it's a salient reminder that mental health difficulties occur within any aspect of life, within any discipline, within any mode of learning and mahi. And so we really need, as women in science, as people who do science, to look after each other and think about our own mental health needs. So ngā mihi nui ki a koe. E te rangatira e Lily. There's a picture of Lily. She was a staunch advocate for women in science. This is a photo I took on my iPhone in Antarctica. It's an extraordinary place. Really confronting, actually. So incredibly beautiful. And at the same time vulnerable, and we got to see some of the vulnerabilities of that part of the earth, which really I suppose is something that once you've seen it, once you've witnessed it, it changes you forever. So now I want to talk about the key aspects of the program very briefly. Leadership. We were invited, encouraged, compelled to really unpack our leadership mindset and style, and to think about how that impacts on our ability to lead, putting into words our purpose, our motivations for leading, our values, our emotional and cultural intelligence, and how to manage difficult conversations. We were absolutely privileged to have Musimbi Kanyoro, a Kenyan human rights activist and advocate, with us on the journey. She is a global heavy hitter. She's in the Forbes top 10 women working for gender equality, and she helped guide us through the program. Visibility was another key aspect, and like all of us women, and we discussed this at many points along the year-long journey, and this obviously came to a crunch point on board the ship, is how, as women, we have our own issues about how we tell our story, how we make ourselves visible or less so, how we perceive risks and benefits of that. And I think in New Zealand we have a lot of issues around being visible across genders. So we were lucky to have two comms gurus working with us. Julia May runs her own business. She is a journalist. She was with the Sydney Morning Herald for many years as the foreign correspondent. Jen Martin was a scientist, and then and decided to become a science communicator and teaches a program in science communication. So here are just a few bullet points from my copious notes, which I made on board. Self-awareness and building that, and you know, layers of self-awareness, clearly some are more easily accessible than others, are absolutely critical to building that leadership mindset, learning to tell the story of who we are to ourselves first and then to others. This idea of visibility is an important enabler of leadership, and as I say, I think there are some gender issues there. It means being vulnerable. Vulnerable in terms of communicating about when things don't turn out as planned, which in science we should really be good at, because science is all about being ready for things not turning out as planned. We like that, don't we? So risk, uncertainty, emotional exposure, and recognizing that those tensions, that sense of discomfort is actually the birthplace of courage and belonging, connection, and innovative creativity. They taught us this sort of rubric about the fundamentals of communication, and I thought that might be useful just to have this on a slide for future reference. What's the goal? Who are the audience? What's the message? What's the platform? How are you going to evaluate it, and how do you refine it? That GAMPA kind of crystallization of the key aspects of good communication has been very helpful to me, and I could see it working for the whole group of participants. Learning to tell these leadership stories about turning points and decisions and outcomes is really good and really really useful. What works and what, and we did lots of role play around telling our story and getting feedback about what was really powerful and what was less so. We did lots of exercises and active listening. And one of the key things that I recognised and I wrote down and underlined and circled in my book was listening with wairua and listening with my whole body. We can reflect on that later if we have time. So now I want to turn to the issue of science collaboration. We saw a lot of penguins in Antarctica, and they're amazing creatures, extraordinary creatures. So we had Professor Justine Shaw and Associate Professor Cassandra Brooks with us. Cassandra Brooks is one of the people who helped make the Ross Sea the largest protected marine area in the world. Professor Justine Shaw has been working in science in the Antarctic region for more than 20 years. So these women really know what they're talking about. In fact, Justine's one of the co-founders of the program. And just one of the things that they did with us is we had this thing called a symposium at sea. Every single one of us had to do a 3-minute presentation with only 2 slides. Can you imagine? That was quite challenging for some people. And what was extraordinary was that people talked about their personal journeys, their challenges, their mistakes, their learnings. And it really left me with a drive to replicate this radical truth telling. It was unlike any scientific meeting I've ever been to, and I think we need to do more of it. So I've already hosted a similar session for a group that I'm part of called Super Diverse Women, which some of you might be aware of or might be interested in joining. We had a webinar just after level 4, where people gave short talks based on the quote, if one woman told the truth about her life, the world would split open. So we each talked about if there was one thing we could change, what would it be? And that was very powerful. So there have been lots of things that have come out of, already for me, come out of the experience in Antarctica and in Homeward Bound as a whole. Here's a picture of us at the Great Wall Station, the Chinese research station in Antarctica. Just a few things about Antarctica. It is spellbinding, as I think I've already said, and as some of you will know, it is the lungs and the heart of the world. There are complex currents that are fundamental and have an extraordinary influence on the global climate emergency. So there's the circumpolar current, which is a horizontal current, and there's a vertical current about the salinity of the water that drops down and then drives out to other currents around the world. And so as Antarctica is cooling and the sea ice is reducing, this is having extraordinary effects on all aspects of that ecosystem and on all of us. So that was pretty sobering. And talking to the research scientists at Carlini at the Great Wall, yeah, pretty depressing actually. So let's finally look a bit at strategy. We had the inimitable Kit Jackson, who's a global leader in strategic thinking. Oh, sorry about that. Typo. And she is a queen rather than a king, as I've got there, and implementation. We developed or began to develop a personal plan and deliberately choose healthier habits, particularly clarifying our personal choices to move past some of the surface assumptions. And like most of us, we all worked out, we spend a lot of time thinking about our careers and work, and then our whānau, our families, and we leave ourselves usually very much to the end, and really owning that and thinking about how to modify that was a key part of the strategic planning work that we did. And there's a little bit of a whale's tail that I took with my iPhone. I think that's the one I took with my iPhone. It's hard to take a good picture of a whale unless you have one of those monster cameras, which that's not something I have. But I thought you'd like to see that. We did see a number of whales, extraordinary. And I suppose one of the things in terms of the climate emergency that I did think about a lot was imagine a world without whales. I don't want to live in a world without whales, but that's what we're looking down the barrel of at the moment. In terms other issues in terms of strategy, we talked a lot about being overwhelmed by the sort of trade-offs in life where there's a cost. There's some sort of time cost, energy cost, financial cost, and how we are much clearer and deliberate about those. Strategy is about those choices, but it's only as good as the capability to execute it. So, as the Māori strategic leader of Rangiora Aotearoa, Brain Research New Zealand, I think a lot about the capability and the capacity we have to execute and to deliver our Māori strategy. We are better planners than doers. And we know in science and research that we put a lot of investment in the upfront aspects, but we don't put so much resource into the implementation part. That's well recognised, and I think we at BRNZ are talking and thinking a lot about that in terms of the next iteration, fingers crossed, of our core. The importance of aligning those resources with the strategy is really what I'm saying. Some of the other key things, when values and priorities align, we really blossom. So when we feel the vibe, when we feel the joy and the passion aligning with those priorities that we can see, that's when that sort of energy kicks up and we feel that, we can do anything. The sky's the limit. Working on these areas of self, relationships and work, we were constantly reviewing these questions. What fulfills me the most in those areas? What's my legacy? What's really important in my life? And before I come to my conclusions, I just want to talk about some important contextual things that also shaped us, because I don't want to forget those. One of the participants was a firefighter from Australia, Lily, and we were so lucky that she was on board because she really helped us understand the gravity of the bushfire phenomena in Australia. So the bushfires were raging when we went and when we came back. Around 46 million acres of land has been burnt. 34 direct deaths, 417 by smoke inhalation, including the deaths of 13 Victorian firefighters, and 1 billion animals died. While we were away, we were just coming back through the Drake Passage, and we heard about the terrible, the devastating events of the eruption of Whakaari of White Island, where 21 people died and 26 people were injured. And on the same day, we actually saw this plane flying over us. This was a Chilean plane going to their base, which crashed and 38 people died. We gathered together on the ship around initially when we heard about what had happened at White Island, the New Zealand contingent gathered. We put together a presentation, if you will, an acknowledgement, and we wanted to also acknowledge the concerns of other peoples and their places and their countries and things that were happening there for them. And then when we heard about the plane crash, we had some processes on board to acknowledge that. So there were lots of learnings, lots of hua, lots of fruitful lessons. I suppose first and foremost, Indigenous knowledge can be easily admitted unless there are Indigenous people there present to make sure that information is included. Then, and this really worries me. You know, these are really wonderful global citizens, and even in that context, the Indigenous voice can be lost, and it shouldn't rely on having an Indigenous person there. So yeah, that was a good lesson for me to be a witness to that and to continue to reflect on what we do about that. Knowledge must not be a privilege. Going on this trip, I was reminded of my enormous privilege. I'm very well educated. I've been given a lot of opportunities, and I got to go on this trip. And it made me think a lot about all the women who are missing out on those opportunities through no fault of their own, and what I might be able to do about that, what we might be able to do about that in BRNZ. Also reflected on the small wins and mistakes and sharing learnings. You know, it's so powerful when we talk about the things that didn't go according to plan, or the things that we feel we made a mistake about or failed in. Because that is the fulcrum of deeper self-awareness and some real light bulb moments. Science is not neutral. I was really impressed by the depth of conversation around this on board. What was pretty scary too was a lot of these women were saying that they wanted to get out of academia. They felt that academia had not lived up to the dream, and was really quite an uncomfortable place at best for many of these women, which was also deeply troubling. And the impact of politics in terms of who gets funded, how the funding is allocated, as you saw in one of my earlier slides, the discrimination against women around funding and seniority. And also recognising that scientific data is not enough to change policy or behaviour. We've got to learn to tell better stories. In fact, you know, a lot of these other women who are, you know, doing their kind of science, astrophysics, oceanography, genetics, they were saying, you know what, we have enough data, but we're not sharing the data in a way that it's really having an impact. Thought you'd like to see a picture of a chin-strapped penguin at that point. And maybe just to expand on that, lots of barriers stop scientific evidence having impact. And maybe this is something that we could talk more about at BRNZ, because we could have even more impact than we are having now. And I'd like to see us put some more energy into that. You know, there are the election periods, which in New Zealand are quite short. There's some degree of avoidance, how we might work with that around politicians and policymakers, treasury, compassion fatigue, vested interests, a lack of consolidated message. This was a major theme that scientists need to grapple with. We can come across as having lots of too much of a diverse view about giving, because we know a simple answer is not so easy in many topics, but how we give some degree of clarity in answering questions and provide a wider context, and how we get better at that, I think, is really important. Technical language makes science unrelatable. This is unfortunate, but this is a reality, and how we all embrace this and work with this and find some strategies to to communicate more effectively. There is a lack of robust relationship and common language across politicians, scientists, thought leaders, banks, insurance companies. You know, there are all sorts of players. We actually did a fantastic role play where we were really put into these different groups at a global sustainable committee meeting as part of a UN meeting, and it was based on some people had been part of a similar meeting, and we got to play out these different scenarios, and we were given very strict parameters about who we were allowed to align with and who we were not, and what sorts of things we were allowed to say. And it gave us all a very visceral, real sense of the tensions and when you're trying to create change at a global level. For me, as a psychiatrist, it's underscored the importance that mental health issues are well recognised as being linked to climate emergency, as being linked to this massive disruption between human beings and Mother Earth. And the same is, and the opposite is also true. If we can strengthen our relationship with Mother Earth, with our relationships with Papatūānuku and Tangaroa, this is good for our mental health. And so I'm really interested in how, particularly in our Mātauranga platform, through your PhD, Chelsea, and other work that we're doing, Justine's PhD, how we might grow research around that might be specifically illuminating around protection for the aging brain, maintaining a healthy brain throughout the lifespan, and providing perhaps some particular interventions in strengthening older people's relationships with their whenua as a way of mitigating some of those experiences that they may have of neurodegenerative disease. And I really feel that growing this awareness in our workforce is a key thing that we need to do at BRNZ. This program is also very much about opening doors for others to come through. So it was lonely being the only Indigenous person on this program, and knowing that I was the first Indigenous person to be accepted onto the program. And so I'm absolutely driven to support other Indigenous women and other New Zealand women to do this program. Another key learning is, you know, we have to look after ourselves. It's very difficult what we do. It's very stressful. There are lots of competing imperatives, budgetary issues, writing issues, completing projects, coming up with robust design, coming up with innovative design, recruiting participants. There are so many stresses involved in this complex clinical research community interface that we, I think, uniquely and importantly are navigating with what we do at BRNZ, and it's stressful, and so we have to look after ourselves. I was really reminded about that. I think it's clear that women in STEM have a unique collaborative leadership approach, which is vital to contributing to solutions in the modern world. And so, female colleagues, apply for this program. Talk to me about it. I would love to support you. Male colleagues, recognise your power and privilege and deliberately and visibly share that. Couple of final slides. We did a polar plunge. So I have immersed myself in the waters of Te Tihi o Te Moana, Antarctica, for just a few seconds because it was extremely cold. And here I am proudly wearing my BRNZ t-shirt on a particularly spectacular sunny day in Antarctica. And now I just want to play you a little sound file. So every morning on board, we would hear the lovely voice of Maria Cashin saying, "Good morning, good morning." And she recorded a message for us to take with us wherever we go. And I want to play that to you now. I think.
A very good evening to all on board. And it is another great pleasure to announce that the dinner is being served in the restaurant. We wish you all bon appetit and enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Okay, no, that wasn't Maria, clearly. That was the captain of the ship, who also would send us these messages. Let me go to Maria now. Here we go.
Good morning, Homeward Bound sisters. It is a beautiful morning wherever you are. It's time to rise and embrace the day. A reminder to nourish yourself, reflect on the memories of your time on the Hebridean sky. Get outside, enjoy the day. Good morning, everyone.
So with that, that concludes my presentation. Ngā mihi matahere ki a koutou, ki a koe Brain Research New Zealand. Ngā mihi, kia ora.
Kia ora koe, Hinemoa. Thank you so much. That was really, really amazing and really thoughtful. I think we'll just draw it to a close. Is that okay, Hinemoa? Are we okay for a close?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, I think everybody can give you a real clap or a virtual clap or whatever you wish. That was really, really interesting. Thank you so much.